Good morning. This is Paul Massaro with the State Department of Water Resources, and this is a webinar that we're offering as a tutorial and instructional opportunity for taking the California Water Plan Sustainability Assessment Survey. So first of all, I'd like to thank you for participating, and moreover, I'd like to thank you for the contributions that you will be providing to the state's water plan through this assessment survey. Before we jump right into it, I'd like to take care of a couple of housekeeping items. If I could ask participants to electronically raise their hand. Basically, this is an audio check just to make sure that that we're live and our audio is properly functioning, and it is. Thank you very much. The other thing that I would like to offer is there is a Q&A window on the WebEx software, and I invite you to submit questions via that window, and our staff will be responding real time, and we can also, if there are some questions that appear to be maybe useful for the entire group, we'll also read those back and answer them. So first of all, let me begin by describing really the purpose and the value and the importance of this survey. And I think it's important also that we spend some time talking about the context and the terminology and the backdrop. This survey is one part of the California Water Plan Update 2018, albeit a critical part, but it is one part. So I just wanted to provide the context on how this fits into the bigger water plan itself. First of all, if I could, Lou, have you, I'm here with Louis Moeller, the project manager for the California Water Plan. And what you're looking at now is the water plan homepage. And available on this page are a few things. One of them, of course, is the link to the survey itself, which we'll get into here in a moment, the mechanics of the survey and the description of the actual terminology, a walkthrough, basically. And then also, again, for that critical backdrop and context, what you're seeing now on the screen is the posted materials from two public meetings we held in October, a policy advisory committee, which is a public meeting, and then also the annual water plan plenary meeting. And each of those links that you're looking at now will take you to the meeting materials, so the presentation content, the handouts, and even the meeting notes. And in this, in both of these meetings, we described the framework for the next water plan update, including a draft outline for the report. And I'll refer back to that shortly when I talk about how the information for this assessment will be used, particularly within the context of the document. So I just wanted to provide that as an opportunity for background. We will not be going over all that content today. I just wanted to alert you to its existence and the value of accessing it if you want to see the bigger picture of what this survey is and how it fits in. So there's two other things I wanted to describe before getting into a brief walkthrough of the survey itself. And I think this is critical information to know prior to launching into the survey. And so one thing is, are you able to go to the, yes please, on that link. There's some lead-in text for the survey itself, which basically highlights the fact that the content we will be presenting is actually going to materially shape Update 2018, and in particular, the recommendations that will be brought forward in the water plan. So in essence, this water sustainability outlook assessment is going to inform, identify where many of the gaps are, where many of the challenges remain in California water management, thereby setting up the rationale and informing the recommendations. So in a nutshell, that really is meant to underscore the importance of this survey and the value of your contributions. And so before we jump into that, let me get into a little bit of content and terminology that I think actually it's a full framework for framing water sustainability, complete with specific terminology that will help us communicate and have a shared understanding of what sustainability is and how we're intending to frame it up and pursue it from a policy standpoint.
Want the brochure first? Or?
Actually, this first document, if I can have you, if you could scroll down to the bottom of the second page. So just to close out the discussion on the context and use of this information, This two-page document, which is available, as you saw on the cover page for the survey, is more than you need to know to take the survey. And I just wanted to key into basically these enumerated items 3 through 6 for the context and utility of this information. So number 3 here shows that developing a water management effectiveness assessment survey, that is what has been prepared, and that is what we will do a walkthrough of shortly. Number 4 is actually the report that will subsequently be developed based on the information and feedback we receive. So this is chapter 2 in the outline. So I showed you earlier, or we showed you earlier, where that outline resides as part of the October meetings. And this is basically chapter 2, which will be titled something very similar to Water Sustainability Outlook. And so this outlook will be based upon the information we receive. And then going on to number 5, developing recommendations to overcome the gaps and challenges identified in the survey. So this will be chapter 3 in the outline, which is basically the policy recommendations and priority actions for state government. So again, I alluded to it earlier. Now this is a little more specific illustration. The information we receive will inform the recommendations for Update 2018. And then, of course, the assessment results and draft recommendations will be made available. And then one other thing that's not on this document that I just want to mention is Chapter 4 in the outline of the actual document will be a finance plan. So we will advance recommendations in Chapter 3 for state government policies and investment priorities. We'll also identify the costs associated with it and the most viable and stable financing alternatives for those recommendations. So you can see how this information really starts to provide a foundation for the entire storyline of Update 2018. And then with that, what I mentioned earlier is we developed a framework for sustainability to shape the conversation. I know a lot of us in our careers and a lot of water interests have talked about and described in various manners kind of the ideal of sustainability. What we've developed is a framework that will enable us to materially create policy in pursuit of sustainability and also to track progress towards sustainability. So really where the rubber meets the road. And what you're looking at now is a brochure that we prepared to summarize this sustainability framework. And the highest level message is that really we're suggesting sustainability is not a state of being where we can declare ourselves sustainable. It's more of a journey and specifically more of a dynamic balance between 4 of what we call societal values. And those are shown in the bubble. We have public health and safety, healthy economy, thriving ecosystems, and opportunities for enriching experiences. And together, these 4 categories encompass virtually every water management aspect and interest, and in doing so, help us comprehensively frame sustainability. And again, the key point is that it's the dynamic balance between these 4 things. It's not that these stand alone and we create policy independent of the other 4 to advance or sustain any one of these. It's that we need to balance these. And so to get into the next level of description, so that's great. There's 4, I'll say, succinct descriptions of these societal values. Public health and safety, it's the bold blue, dark blue text you see now on the screen, and there's 4 of them that I mentioned. This is just one page you're looking at. But if you look down the next level, I almost view this in terms of rows. So the next row, if you will, is the italicized blue, lighter blue text. All Californians are protected from health and safety. That's really the goals. Then they're aspirational, as they should be for the state strategic planning document that the water plan is. So that's the next level of description. Right? I mentioned the point is to develop an actionable framework that can inform policy, hence the tiering of specificity or progressively elaborating on each of these societal values. So if you could scroll down one more row, if you will. So then the black text really indicates the more specific intended outcomes, and that's a term you'll see in the survey, intended outcomes and indicators that support those 4 societal values. So you can see it's kind of an unpacking of those 4 values to the point where we can work with it in plain speak. Adequate water supply for domestic needs, sanitation, and fire suppression, getting into the more quantifiable, more material aspects that, again, can help us inform and track policy, track the effectiveness of policy. And then if you could just go to the last page and show In terms of sustainability planning for the next water plan update, so those are the other two that you're looking at now, the other two societal values. And if you could go down to the last page, how it kind of all comes together. This is what we're doing for Water Plan Update 2018. And I would just want to point out for you where the assessment itself lies in this planning cycle, if you will. So you can see the water plan at the top. Update 2018 will be published. It'll involve forming actions and implementing actions. But where we are now on this wheel, really, and where we're entering this process is if you see monitor and evaluate towards the bottom, that's what this survey is doing. It's informing us on how we're doing in terms of statewide sustainability. And so that's the step where we are on this wheel. The next step will be developing the intended outcomes we need to advance those 4 societal values. And then, of course, identifying the alternatives. That's where the action comes into play. What are the actions that can actually advance these societal values? And then, of course, the point here is that it is a cyclic activity because things evolve. Our understanding of the system, water management system evolves, societal values, at least the way they're unpacked, can be characterized differently going forward. And I think most importantly here is going forward, the 2018, we've developed the framework, we're applying the framework, and we're suggesting this be a consistent construct for subsequent updates. And that provides tremendous value for the long view in terms of California water planning, because then we have a consistent set of indicators which we can measure progress from and determine the effectiveness of our investments and policies, and we can continuously making it increasingly robust going forward. So I would say this is more than a pilot effort, but it's not the catch-all, end-all for sustainability planning either. So with each water plan cycle, we will be increasing the robustness of this framework and continuously using its application in each subsequent water plan update. And so with that, I know that's a lot of background and context, but you'll see some of the terminology will start to emerge as we jump into a quick walkthrough of the survey itself, and I think it'll start making a little more sense as we go through it. And so Louis Moeller will be describing, providing a quick walkthrough and describing some of the context and maybe flagging some of the stuff that I just talked about as it appears in the survey.
Thank you, Paul. So this is Louis Moeller. I'm the project manager on this water plan, and what I will do is I'm going to actually step through the entire survey here today, but and then point out a few things as we go along. I'm starting from the very start, the front page of this thing, and so you've seen the brochure and the Water Management Effectiveness Framework. We've walked through that already. And it is important to get that information because we are going to ask you whether you've looked at that information before you answer some of the questions, because it's important to have at least a grounding of what our intent is on those 4 societal values so that we can actually gain from you some insight. The first page that beyond the front page there is the background questions, and this is something that we're asking so that we can kind of get a sense for where you're coming from, what your experience is, where your areas are, and so on these drop-down boxes you can see that there's different types of categories of where you might be working in the area, what areas you focus in, what your interest might be, primary interest might be, and then we have our hydrologic region map here, and then we'd like to know, where do you live, basically, because that could have some impact on how you might respond to some of these questions as well.
Sorry, I was just going to jump in. I kind of alluded to it, but didn't emphasize it, that we are, and it's in the intro text, that we are looking at this from a statewide sustainability lens, if you will, albeit we do want regional perspectives on that. For future updates, our intent is to conduct a regional scale assessment like this, but for Water Plan Update 2018, it's going to be a statewide look.
Yeah, and that was put in this first part there too, but that's very critical. One thing that we can do, and I'll show you where, once we get past this page, we get into some of these questions here. But right now, we're going to ask you from the current perspective, in general, to what extent are intended outcomes defined for water management sustainability? And this is a question that you can answer, and it's going to take you on to a different part of the walk there. If you don't think that they're done, we may ask you for some clarifying answers to that as well. But if you continue on to this one, so if we say maybe hardly on this, then it'll ask you, considering current intended outcomes for water management, please answer the following questions. Now, all of our questions are following the same thing, and you'll see it on the last page in here. We have it from not at all to fully, so it's a scale of response that we're having. And I don't know is there as well. But the scale is from not at all to fully, and if you don't have any knowledge or you don't feel like you have the knowledge to answer that one question, you can always put I don't know. We're hoping that you most probably have some kind of experience on each one of these kind of questions. So we're asking these kind of questions. We also have dialog boxes, and this is the first time the dialog box has shown up. And what Paul was saying is that we are asking you from a statewide perspective to answer these questions. Keep in mind, so you could answer up here as a statewide in the scale here, but you could elaborate as to why it might differ at a regional scale. So we'd like to hear from you if you think that, yeah, while we're doing well in this, I know that the state may not be doing that well statewide or something like that. So you could elaborate a little bit more. You can explain why you chose your answer to the question as well. There might be some reason why you want to, elaborate on that as well. So all of these questions have a similar type of thing. We ask a little bit more. So we ask, have the intended outcomes been defined? Are they concisely described in the official document with some influence? So this might be plans or something like that that are out there. Are the intended outcomes organized around the four societal values? And this might, there may be documents out there. A lot of this, the four societal values is very similar to the definition of sustainability used up till now. So we've got four. It's been typically a three-legged stool of sustainability you may have been seen before. So there could be answers along those lines. So this is where we come into the next part of the survey. We're asking that you really do need to have read that brochure in order to go on. So we give you a link to that brochure again. And then we ask you a question as to whether you've reviewed it or not. If you click you have not reviewed it, you'll be taken back to the brochure again. And that's how important we think it is to have actually looked at that brochure. But if you've reviewed it, and let's say you reviewed it and you had some questions about it or something like that, or wanted further explanation on it, you can click on I've reviewed it, but there's some misunderstanding or non-understanding. Take a moment, you can explain why you didn't, or have suggestions, you can put it into this dialog box for us so that we could better explain. So this will give us some feedback on how we might be able to do that brochure better and explain this better. Clicking through that, you come into now, we show these four societal values and intended outcomes are the top, the goals, for each of the values there. To remind you, this is kind of pulled right off of that brochure as well. Keep that in. So now we ask more questions, and in general, are these appropriate and sufficient for determining sustainability of water management is the first question there. Again, it's a scale, it's a statewide version, and you can elaborate on it. Are these proposed intended outcomes for sustainability manageable, few in number, and well stated? And you can also, maybe there's one or two that you want to elaborate on that could be better. Can the proposed intended outcomes be evaluated at least qualitatively, if not quantitatively? And for the most part, at this time, these questions that we're asking are more on a qualitative basis, although there is some quantitative data behind things. And if you read into it, we have other levels of analysis that we're doing as well, that we actually get into quantitative assessment of these things as well. Can the update 2018 intended outcomes be evaluated as whether they're in dynamic balance with one another? And then that might be something that you would want to elaborate on as well. Now, the next series of questions are going to be covering those 4 societal values. And they're very similar. They ask some questions very specific that fall under these 4 societal values as to how you think we're doing in different areas. And I'm not going to go into each one of them, but I'm going to show you, go through this public health and safety one first. And again, we have a question like, do Californians have safe drinking water? And you're going to answer that, or, you know, in your opinion, from not at all to mostly, or fully, or even I don't know, if you feel you're not qualified to answer the question. But the, you know, the answers to these questions we're hoping will basically give us feedback as to how we're doing. But based on all those things above, we ask you one final question, and this is going to be similar under all 4 of the societal value questions that we have, is based on your responses, to what extent are Californians protected from health and safety threats and emergencies? And this is going to be, you know, kind of using what you thought of above, you're going to kind of give an overall view of how we're doing in this one societal value. Going on to the next, we're going to have a similar thing for healthy economy, some questions there, and then an overall look. For thriving ecosystems, a few questions, and then finally an overall view. And then for enriching experiences, again, some questions that we have come up with that basically we feel should evaluate how we're doing, and then an overall view from that. So now the final question, I think this might be the final question. Based on your answers to all the previous, to what extent do you think water management is sustainable as defined by a resilient, dynamic balance being maintained amongst the 4 societal values? And again, so this is one that you can put in there. You can elaborate on it if you feel that one or the other, you know, one value may be more in trouble or another. There's a whole. And then that will put you to the end of the survey. Now, if you're wanting to go through this whole survey and then go back, you can go back. You can stop the survey at any time and come back to it as long as you come back to the same computer, because it's dependent upon, you know, where you logged in. So you use the same computer or same device. You can take it on your cell phone, for example, if you wanted to. And that will put you back to where you left off last time. If you hit done at this last place, then you are submitting it, basically, at that point. And so you can't go back and change answers. So if you wanted to at this point and say, gosh, now having seen the whole thing, I want to change an answer or elaborate on something on a previous page, you can always hit the previous button on each page and go back and take a look. And that's pretty much a walkthrough on what we've got here. I'm going to get to the end.
Comment.
One thing is there any?
The email address, the comment,
Okay.
Did you mention at the end?
Yeah, let's get to the very end. There is also a link in the last page to the water plan. That's where most of our information is always contained there. And then there's a comment. If you wanted to contact us and give us comments on the survey outside of the survey itself, you can send in comments on the CWP.com. That's where we receive all our comments. We monitor those and get them to the right people for answers as well. The other thing is on the water plan, I should note if you're wanting to track the water plan, you may already be signed up for our e-news, thank you. Our e-news service that comes out with a e-news once a week, and it'll announce any upcoming meetings, it'll announce anything that we're doing, and also interesting information around water planning in California. So I think that's it for this part here. So
Thank you. That was a good description. And lastly, I just wanted to check in. Are there any questions that okay, no written questions submitted? All right. Well, in that case, this concludes our webinar. As you saw there on the page you're looking at now, there is a oh, yes, thank you. February 6th, it's noted in the introductory text of the survey that February 6th will be the deadline for submitting your survey. And again, what you're looking at now is an opportunity to learn more and submit questions. And I want to conclude by, again, thanking you for your time that you've taken with us here today, and again, for the time that you're putting into informing the state's water plan. I'm seeing one question coming in.
So we have a question, and says, what is the next step after the survey?
Well, the survey information will be processed and articulated and ultimately documented in Chapter 2 of the actual report, which is, again, the title will be something very similar to Water Sustainability Outlook Report. And so that's where that information will be presented. And again, where it'll be used is to inform the policy recommendations in Chapter 3. As for the process, we have a policy advisory committee with folks representing various water interests. We have approximately 30 members. We will be working through that process. Those meetings are public. So in terms of the document, it'll be Chapter 2, inform Chapter 3. In terms of the process, we have a public process framed up, and all that information is also contained on our website. All right. Okay, well, thank you very much, and I wish you all a good day. Take care.
The leader has disconnected. This call will now end.